I remember the exact moment it happened. I was sitting in that gray cubicle with the flickering fluorescent light. Overhead, the one I had asked maintenance to fix 6 times, the one that buzzed. Just enough to keep you on edge, but never loud enough to justify a complaint. That was where I sat for 8 years. Same desk, same chair, same smile plastered on my face, pretending I wasn't waiting for something I knew deep down was never going to come. Then came the email subject line, "Let's chat," from Dan Miller, VP of Operations. Time 3:14 p.m. My heart knew before my brain even finished reading it. Promotion season, the end of Q2, the June 7th in a row that I'd thrown everything I had into proving myself. I walked into his office exactly 2 minutes early, not too eager, not too casual. I wore the navy blazer I saved for important conversations, the one that still smelled faintly of dry cleaner starch. Dan was scrolling on his phone when I walked in. He didn't look up right away, like I was interrupting something more valuable than my future. Then he smiled, not a warm smile, not a human smile, one of those "I hope you don't make this" awkward smiles. "Linda," he said, gesturing to the seat in front of his desk, "thanks for coming in." I already knew, but I still held on to the tiniest thread of hope. Hope is stubborn like that, it sticks around even after your dignity has left the room. Dan folded his hands. "So we've completed our internal reviews, and while your performance has been really solid, the leadership team has decided to go in a slightly different direction this cycle." I blinked again. He leaned back, sighed like this was hard for him. "You're doing great work, Linda. I mean that. Keep trying. Maybe next time, maybe next time." That was the 13th time Dan or someone above him had said some version of those words to me. 13 times I had watched someone else get promoted. 13 times I had smiled and said, "I understand," even when I didn't. I nodded like I had a choice. "Thanks for the feedback," I managed to say. What I didn't say was that I had trained 4 of the people who now had titles above mine, that I had carried entire project teams when their leaders disappeared, that I hadn't taken a real vacation in almost 3 years. I walked back to my desk like I wasn't falling apart inside. That night I sat in my car in the company parking lot, staring at the dashboard for over an hour. It was raining, of course. It always rains when your heart's breaking and no one's around to notice. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just sat there until my fingers stopped shaking. Then I called my younger brother Marcus. He's an ER nurse, used to seeing pain up close. I told him everything about the promotion, about Dan, about the way I felt like I was disappearing. He listened without interrupting. Then he said something I didn't expect. "You know what your problem is, Lynn?" I laughed bitterly. "Enlighten me." "You keep showing loyalty to people who wouldn't notice if you dropped dead at your desk. It's like you're trying to win a game where they've hidden the finish line." I didn't say anything. 13 times he said again softly, "Come on." That night something shifted in me, something permanent. I didn't decide to burn the place down. I didn't decide to sabotage anyone. That's not who I am. But I did decide something else. I would never let these people decide my value again. Not Dan, not the company, not the leadership team, who only remembered my name when they needed something fixed. That was the night I began what I called the quiet exit. Not quitting, not yet, but beginning the 6-month clock to build my way out instead of begging to be let in. The Monday after rejection number 13. I walked into the office like nothing had changed. Same blazer, same coffee mug, same half smile as I passed Dan's door and nodded like we were still pretending to be cordial. But everything inside me had shifted, because this time I wasn't hoping to be seen. I was watching them instead. People think revenge is loud, but the most dangerous kind is the kind you never see coming. Mine started with a spreadsheet. I called it my quiet exit tracker. Simple, private, password protected. It had 4 tabs. Tab 1. Assets, everything I had ever built for the company. Templates, process guides, client retention strategies, all the things they took for granted. Tab 2. Relationships, not just internal teams but clients' names, contact info, decision makers who liked me, who trusted me, who called me instead of Dan when things got messy. Tab 3. Gaps, all the systems I had quietly patched up over the years. Data integrity issues, vendor mishandling, supply chain hiccups, the places where I was the fix but no one ever credited me for it. And Tab 4. Leverage. This one took weeks to build. It was a map of how many systems ran because I made them run, not because they were well designed, but because I was there holding the seams together. This wasn't about being petty, it was about being prepared. I gave myself 6 months. That's How long I would keep playing the part 6 months to quietly build my next chapter while Paragon's sorry Dan and company had no idea what was coming. The first month was all about control. I stopped volunteering for every fire drill Dan's favorites created. I smiled. I nodded. I delivered without overextending. I began to document every major piece of work I did, but not in their systems, in mine. Every solution, every workaround, every client concern I solved. Meanwhile, I updated my portfolio, not a resume, a portfolio, a record of everything I'd done over the past 8 years that actually mattered. I wasn't applying for another job. I was preparing to build something of my own. I started going for lunch walks. No one noticed, they just assumed I was on client calls. During those walks I talked to people, old colleagues who had left the company, clients who had switched providers, people in the industry who had always told me, you should be doing this on your own. I never said I was planning anything, I just listened, took notes, collected names. By the end of month 2 I had a network, not huge but strong, quiet conversations over coffee, DMs on LinkedIn, a few lunches where people leaned in and said, if you ever do go out on your own, let me know. Meanwhile, back at the office, Dan had already forgotten our last conversation. He passed me in the hallway one morning and actually said, don't give up, Linda. You've got grit. I just smiled. That same afternoon he promoted Jason, the guy who took credit for one of my reports 3 months earlier, number 14. I thought maybe I'd feel something, but I didn't. I just opened my tracker and added one more name to tab, 4 people who were rewarded for my work. It was around this time I realized something strange. I was sleeping better. I wasn't obsessing over the next promotion cycle. I wasn't anxiously refreshing my inbox. I wasn't sitting in bed replaying conversations with Dan, wondering what I could have said differently. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I was just building my exit. It wasn't easy. I'd have moments, brief ones, where I'd start to doubt myself, where I'd hear that little voice that said, you're not a leader, you're a safe pair of hands, you're replaceable. But then I'd remember, if I was so replaceable, why did everything fall apart when I was out sick for 3 days last year? Why did clients email me, not Dan, when projects hit the fan? Why did I always end up cleaning up the messes? The only reason I hadn't left yet was because I thought loyalty would eventually earn me a place at the table. Spoiler, it never does. By the end of month 3 I had outlined my business plan, consulting, niche specific, high value. I knew where the gaps were in our industry. I knew how many clients were sick of firms like ours. I'd been on the calls, I'd heard the complaints. I wasn't just planning to leave, I was planning to solve a problem that Dan didn't even realize existed, and I wasn't doing it out of bitterness. I was doing it because I deserved better. They just didn't know yet that when I walked out the door I'd be taking far more than a desk plan and my coffee mug with me, and the best part, they wouldn't even see it coming. By month 4 the office started changing, not in any dramatic, visible way, but in subtle, almost imperceptible shifts. People started coming to me for answers before going to their actual supervisors. It started with Tara from finance. Hey Linda, quick question, do you remember how we reconciled that vendor invoice loop last quarter? Jason said to wait for it, but I fixed it in 10 minutes quietly. No credit asked. Then it was Sam from legal, then Rachel from product, then 3 different project managers from client delivery. It wasn't because I advertised myself as the go-to, it was because everyone knew who would actually get things done, and I made sure to note every single one of those moments in my quiet exit tracker. The dependencies were multiplying, and Dan had no clue. He was too busy planning a leadership offsite for quarter 3. I wasn't invited again, not that I expected to be. It was around this time that I also started getting emails from old clients, soft pings. Hey Linda, long time. Can we hop on a quick call? Or I heard you were the brains behind that last rollout. Got time for coffee? I was careful, never crossed any lines. I didn't sell anything, didn't pitch, I just listened, answered questions, made myself helpful off the record. And here's the part they really didn't see coming. I started saying no, not rudely, not even directly, but subtly, strategically. When Dan asked me to work late for the new onboarding schedule Jason had forgotten to implement, I said happy to help, but I'll need a formal project brief first. When Kirsten, now a newly promoted client liaison, asked me to revise her pitch deck last minute, I replied, happy to review, but I have back-to-back deliverables today. Can you send it through official channels? Translation: I'm not your fallback anymore. For the first time in 8 years I had boundaries, and the weirdest part, people respected them, or at least they learned to adjust around them. By the middle of month 4 I had completed the second phase of my plan, my escape hatch. I registered my LLC. Just a shell company on paper for now. LMC Strategies. I hired a freelance designer to create a minimalist logo. I set up a clean professional landing page. No services listed, no contact info, just a brand just presents to the outside world. It looked like I was preparing for something, but to Paragon I was still just Linda, the reliable one, the safe pair of hands. Dan even stopped me in the hallway one day and said, "Hey, you've been really solid lately, keep it up, you never know when the next round of promotions is coming." I didn't even laugh this time, I just looked at him and said, "Thanks Dan, appreciate it." The truth is I wasn't angry anymore. I was past that. What I felt was clarity. I could finally see the system for what it was, a loop, a rigged machine that fed off people like me. Quiet, competent, loyal, while rewarding whoever made the most noise in meetings. I'd spent too many years trying to solve an equation that was never designed to be solvable, but now I had leverage, real leverage, and I hadn't even used it yet. Not once. I hadn't threatened to leave. I hadn't hinted at dissatisfaction. I hadn't made a scene or demanded anything. I had simply become essential and documented every thread that ran through me. Meanwhile, back at the office, the cracks were starting to show. Jason missed a vendor renewal deadline that cost the company $18,000. Kirsten submitted a client proposal with 3 incorrect data points and blamed the numbers team. A new junior hire had accidentally wiped a shared database because no one had bothered to onboard her properly. Dan's solution: another meeting, another leadership alignment session, another chance to say vague things like "we're evolving our org structure to support excellence," and me, I just kept smiling, nodding, solving while quietly building something better on the side. By the time I hit month 5, my pipeline was real. 3 clients had expressed soft interest in working with me if I ever decided to go out on my own. 2 of them had already asked for proposals. I hadn't sent them yet because this wasn't about desperation, this was about power, timing, control, and Dan, bless him, still had no idea, but he would. It started with a missed call from Meridian Systems. Dan didn't notice at first, neither did Jason or Kirsten or anyone else sitting in that sleek glass conference room where people like me were never invited unless they needed someone to take notes. But I noticed because Meridian had never called the general support line before. They called me every time when I didn't answer that day, not because I was being vindictive, but because I was in a coffee meeting with someone much more important. They left a voicemail, one that made something inside me click. "Hey Linda, just checking in, notice some changes in the reporting dashboard. It's not updating the way you set it up. We're kind of stuck. Can you take a quick look?" They said it casually, but I knew what that meant. They were circling, because when your clients are used to efficiency, any hiccup feels like a full-blown emergency. And I had built the dashboard from scratch. That night I didn't open my work laptop. Instead I opened a fresh document on my personal device, client transfer protocol, a step-by-step breakdown of how I would onboard clients from my old life into my new one, cleanly, ethically, and with airtight boundaries. Still, I wasn't ready to move, not yet. Because the real impact of absence doesn't come the first time someone can't reach you, it comes the 3rd time. The 4th, the moment when they start wondering if you're gone for good. That moment came 2 weeks later. Heelbridge Technologies had a rollout planned for a Friday. I'd built their entire automation plan. Dan had assigned Jason to shadow me on the account, but Jason had never once joined a single call. Thursday afternoon I handed over the final handoff notes like I always did. Jason nodded blankly, clearly planning to wing it. Friday morning at 9:12 a.m. my personal phone buzzed. Heelbridge CEO, not a project manager, not an assistant, the CEO. I didn't answer. A few minutes later, an email, subject, urgent. "Hi Linda, not sure if you're on this project anymore, but things are breaking left and right. Jason says you were the architect. Can you please help?" I stared at the screen. I felt nothing, no panic, no guilt, no desperate need to jump in and save them like I always had, just confirmation it had started. The very structure they said I wasn't senior enough to be a part of was quietly falling without me. Later that day, Dan messaged me on Slack, "Hey, quick, cue you around to jump on a call. Heelbridge having some snags, shouldn't take long." Snags, right? I didn't respond. Instead I Went back to the tracker. I added 2 columns: calls missed and escalation level. By the end of the week, 9 missed calls from internal teams, 6 emails from clients, 3 Slack messages from Dan, 1 executive escalation directly from Heelbridge, and I still said nothing. I was still employed, still showing up, still smiling during Monday meetings, but I was done saving people who didn't know what they had until it was gone. That Friday I submitted my resignation letter. No theatrics, no dramatic speech. Just a clean formal email. Dear Dan, after much consideration I've decided to resign from my position at Paragon effective 2 weeks from today. I'm grateful for the opportunities I've had here. Best, Linda. It took 14 minutes for Dan to call me. I didn't answer. 20 minutes after that I got the second call from HR. Still no response. Then came the email from Dan. Linda, can we please talk? Let's not make this harder than it needs to be. We can revisit your promotion track. Let's discuss options. Options. Like I hadn't waited for 13 rounds of options. I didn't reply because I already had my options. 3 clients had quietly confirmed their willingness to follow me, each one more fed up with Paragon than the last, and the best part, one had never signed a non-compete. Dan had forgotten or assumed, but I hadn't. By Monday morning word had spread. I walked in like any other day, sat at my desk, logged in, acted normal. Dan approached, face tight. We should talk. I looked up calmly. Sure, I have 30 minutes before my next meeting. He was already sweating. Dan shut the door behind him like we were about to have a friendly catch-up, but I could already see at the cracks behind his customer service grin the desperation he was trying to suppress. He sat across from me, leaned forward, elbows on knees, like he was trying to be real with me for the first time in 8 years. Linda, he started. Look, I know you're upset. I tilted my head. Upset? He blinked. I mean about the timing, the promotion situation. I get it. He didn't get it, not even close. I just want to understand, he said. Why now? I almost laughed, but instead I took a deep breath and gave him what he'd never given me: honesty, because after 13 rejections I finally realized you're not going to change, I said quietly, and I stopped waiting for you to notice what I've done here. Dan ran a hand through his thinning hair, exhaling. Look, we can fix this. You've been invaluable lately. The leadership team agrees. Let's revisit the promotion. I'm thinking senior consultant. We can fast-track it. That would have worked 2 years ago now. It felt insulting. I'm not staying, I said. Dan's face changed like someone had flipped a switch. Panic just barely restrained under politeness. You need to understand, he said, voice tightening. We're in the middle of 3 major rollouts. You're the point of contact for Meridian and Heelbridge. You walk out now, things fall apart. I said nothing. He stared at me like I'd failed to follow the script, like I was supposed to feel guilty, grateful for the opportunity to be burned out and ignored. We can make it worth your while, he said, his voice softer. 15% raise, senior title, bigger accounts. I met his gaze and said the one thing I'd been holding for years: Dan, you don't get to value me now that I'm walking away. And just like that, the conversation ended. Over the next few days I watched the walls slowly buckle. The Monday after my resignation, Jason broke a key configuration file for Meridian's rollout. It delayed the project by 10 days and cost Paragon over $70,000 in penalty fees. Heelbridge sent in a formal complaint. Your team is unresponsive, disorganized, and unprepared. Internal systems started glitching. No one could figure out the custom data sync I had manually patched 2 years ago, because no one had ever asked how I'd done it. They just assumed I'd always be around to fix it. Dan started emailing me daily. Can you hop on for just 10 minutes? Where did you save the Heelbridge notes? Clients are asking for you by name. Please advise. Each email was more frantic than the last. By the end of my first week of notice I had 48 missed calls. I counted them. Dan, human resources, client liaison, even Kirsten. They were unraveling quietly, messily, completely, and me, I was calm, focused. My onboarding process for my new business was almost complete. My new website went live on Thursday. That same day I received 2 formal inquiries from the clients who had been just curious before. Now they were ready. Paragon didn't even know how deep the shift was yet, but they were about to find out. On day 9 of my notice I received a meeting invite from Vernon, the company's CEO. Subject: let's talk. Dan was already seated when I entered Vernon's office, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Vernon stood to shake my hand, overly formal. Linda, thank you for coming. I nodded, said nothing. We've been reviewing Recent developments, he said. Client feedback, team performance. Frankly, it's been illuminating. Translation: we had no idea how much of this place depended on you until it started breaking. We'd like to make you an offer, he continued. Senior manager, 25% raise, flexible hours, immediate promotion. Dan smiled like this was generous, like I should leap at the chance. I didn't move. Linda, Vernon said, what would it take to keep you here? I met his eyes. Nothing. Silence, just the hum of the air vent and the ticking of the wall clock. I've already moved on, I said. You just didn't notice. They didn't argue after that because they knew. They finally knew when I left the building that evening. I passed Dan in the hallway. He looked up, searching my face for anything. Regret, hesitation, one last shred of uncertainty. I smiled. Good luck, and I meant it. Because what was coming next, they weren't ready. The day after I walked out of Paragon for the last time, I sat at my new desk, not in a cubicle, not under flickering lights, not in a building with motivational posters. No one believed in my desk in my home office with natural light, actual silence, and a nameplate that finally said what I had always been. Linda Cooper, founder and principal consultant, LMC Strategies. No fanfare, no party, just peace and a quiet kind of power that settled into my bones by noon. That day I had 3 signed contracts sitting in my inbox: Meridian, Hillbridge, and a third I hadn't expected, Allensworth Diagnostics, a company I'd only spoken to once but who had heard good things. I didn't poach them, I didn't chase. They came to me. They came because they saw something Paragon never had: someone who solved problems, someone who listened, someone who delivered without asking to be applauded every 5 minutes. Within 3 weeks I had 5 clients and more revenue than I'd ever made in a quarter at Paragon. Dan, meanwhile, was in damage control mode. I know this because Tara, one of the few people I still spoke to, texted me, they're falling apart without you. Vernon called in all hands to restructure. Accountability. Translation: he's panicking. 2 days later I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. It was Dan. Linda, listen, I know things didn't end how they should have, but I'd really like to connect. We've had some challenges. I think we should talk, maybe see if there is any path forward. I didn't call back, not out of spite, but because I wasn't interested in going backward. That same week I hired my first contractor, a systems analyst named Priya. Smart, sharp, overlooked at her last job. By, as she put it, a manager who loved golf more than work. She reminded me of someone. By month 3 I had a full client roster, a legal retainer, and 2 more contractors onboarding. Paragon, meanwhile, had downsized 2 departments. Then came the call block number. I almost didn't answer, but something in me said I should. It was Vernon. Linda, he said, voice strained, thank you for picking up. I waited. I won't waste your time. We're in a tough spot since your departure. We've lost 7 key clients. 3 have explicitly stated it was because of the transition. Morale is not good. Systems are breaking. Deliverables are late. And Dan is, well, Dan is no longer with us. I stayed silent. We'd like to propose a merger, he continued. We acquire your firm. You lead strategy, full autonomy. We need your help. It hit me right then. This was the fantasy I'd had so many nights before, back when I still believed the only way to win was to be let in. But now I had something better than their approval. I had self-respect. I had proof that I could succeed without being tolerated, that I didn't need a seat at their table because I'd built my own. I appreciate the offer, I said, but I'm not interested. There was a long pause. I understand, Vernon said quietly. Then, before he hung up, you were always better than we knew. Too late. A few weeks later I met Kirsten for coffee. She looked exhausted, said she was leaving Paragon too. They don't know what they're doing, she said. They pretend everything's fine, but everyone's terrified. Your name's basically banned in meetings. I smiled. Not smug, just satisfied. You built something, she said, and I want to be part of it. If you're hiring, I'll send my resume. I nodded. Let's talk. By month 6 we were a team of 4. Our clients respected us. Our work mattered. And no one had to fight to be seen. Sometimes I still think about that cheap office chair with the stain, about the flickering lights, about the 13 times I was told to wait my turn, and then I look around at what I've built. No corner cutting, no approval seeking, just clarity, purpose, and a quiet, steady kind of freedom. Because the truth is, the best revenge isn't making them suffer, it's watching them realize they never mattered as much as they thought they did. It's knowing that after 13 rejections I was never really rejected. I was being redirected to something that was mine, to a version of me who doesn't wait to be chosen.